After the break, everyone's brought back into the court. David McLaughlin will continue his cross-examination for the prosecution against Thomas Cashman. He then returns to the figure seen on the CCTV footage, and this is shown to the court. David McLaughlin says, "You say that's not you." Thomas Cashman says, "That's not me, no." David says, "You say you're in that van." Thomas Cashman says, "Yes, I am in that van, yes." David says, "The prosecution disagree." Thomas Cashman says, "Yes." We see an image of a male walking further up the road. "Is that you?" asks David. "No, it's not me," says Thomas Cashman. "Did you see any other lads about at that time?" asked David. "It's 9:20 at night. There could have been, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. "Even though the football's on?" says David. "Yeah, it's 9:20, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. "Do all the lads wear Monterey trackies?" asked David. "Everybody wears what's out at the time, yes. I'm not going to say every single person, but a lot of people were. Same clothing. There were night karaches," says Thomas Cashman. "Not specific to you, that stuff?" says David. "No, a lot of people wear it, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. David McLaughlin then moves on to Cashman's account of counting money with Craig Brine. This supposedly happened at the time of the murder. David McLaughlin says, "How did you count the money? Did you have a little machine?" "We don't have no machine, no. We just go upstairs and count the money with our hands," says Thomas Cashman. "Do you pull it in stacks of thousands?" says David. "They go into packs of 1,000, yeah. We were upstairs for 15-20 minutes, something like that. After we'd done that, I went downstairs. I was smoking my spliff in the back garden. From there, I went into the front garden. He's got a caravan to the left of his garden, and little fishing chairs, and a wall with a fence on, and grass. It's somewhere I'd always be in the front, or in the back," says Thomas Cashman. "When you got interviewed about the murder of the child, was that a dreadful thing for you?" asked David. "Yes, it was," says Thomas Cashman. "Did you think at the time I wasn't even there?" says David. "Yeah, I was. I got advised to go no comment. I listened to him. I put a statement in just to clarify it wasn't me. I've got no involvement. It's nothing whatsoever to do with me. That's what I got advised off my legal team. I listened to my legal team," says Thomas Cashman. "You were with somebody else. Mr. Brine. Did it annoy you that you couldn't say?" says David. "It was something I was advised to do. I got advised to go no comment without putting a prepared statement in. I can't just go in there and say no comment. I need to go in and tell them it wasn't me. I've got no problem whatsoever with these people." David McLaughlin then shows Thomas Cashman the CCTV footage of the gunman. "Do you know who that man is?" asked David. "No, I don't," says Thomas Cashman. "Is it Thomas Cashman?" asked David. "No, that man is not Thomas Cashman," says Thomas Cashman. "With a pair of Monterey trackies on?" says David. "Everyone wears those types of clothes in the area. It doesn't mean it's me that did it. Everyone wears those types of clothes in the area. It doesn't mean it's me that did it. It's a common thing. I live in Huyton, Liverpool," says Thomas Cashman. "Dovecot," says David. "Dovecot, Huyton, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. David McLaughlin then plays the footage of the gunman running away. He says, "Is that you?" "No, it's not me," says Thomas Cashman. David McLaughlin then shows Thomas Cashman CCTV footage of a man running up a road he had been on many times that day. Thomas Cashman says to this, "It's a road where I live. Finchy, Huyton Ways, Dovecot." Mr. McLaughlin plays footage of Cashman walking along earlier that day to the corner of Berryford Road. He is asked about whether it had been raining on that journey. David says, "Is it torrential?" "It was pissing it down, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. "Still raining on Mab Lane?" asked David. "The rain stopped, it stopped raining. You'll see it was torrential rain. It was pissing it down. The rain stopped," says Thomas Cashman. The CCTV then shows a woman getting out of a car, and this woman was wearing flip-flops. "She's braving it." "There's you in torrential rain," says David. "In the torrential rain. You can see how bad it is," says Thomas Cashman. He points to a puddle. Going back to the CCTV footage, it shows Mab Lane, and Thomas Cashman is seen with his hood down. Thomas Cashman says, at that point, it's not as torrential. "It's not?" asks David. David then points out a car using windscreen wipers. Thomas Cashman says to this, "It might have been a little, but it wasn't pissing it down. Everybody can see the rain stopped compared to what it was. It was pissing it down, and now it's not. It's basically not even raining. You could see it was all soaking." "It wasn't you had to hide your identity?" asked David. "No, it wasn't, no. It was something any normal person would do if it was raining bad," says Thomas Cashman. David McLaughlin then plays some more CCTV footage from the same corner, and this footage is later in the evening, and it's just after the shooting. David says, "That person there, if I say to you they'd gone over the backs, would you know what that meant?" Thomas Cashman says to this, "Yes." "What does that mean?" asked David. "You go over the back gardens," says Thomas Cashman. "Do you do that sort of thing?" asked David. "No," says Thomas Cashman. "That person has," says David. "This person has, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. They haven't come down King's Heath. They've gone up to one of the side bits onto Finch Lane through Berriford. That mill ends up on Princess Drive. On CCTV on every single road. King's Heath, he's on CCTV. Finch Lane, he's on CCTV. Berriford Road, he's on CCTV. Princess Drive, he's on CCTV, says Thomas Cashman. David refers to the witness who can't be named. Thomas Cashman says to this, "Someone I was having a bit of fun with." David then mentions where she was living, and he says, "Did it all go horribly wrong?" "No, I was in my mate Craig Bryan's house. This is not me," says Thomas Cashman. The unnamed witness said it's Tommy. "It's Tommy. Head in your hands. I've done Joey," says David. "A total lie. A blatant lie," says Thomas Cashman. "A woman trying to stitch you up," says David. "It is. A woman scorned. It shows you the lengths a woman who's got something in for somebody would go to. This is how low they go to. This person, you suggest, has garden hopped. It's not me. I'm in Snowbury Road. If I was to go from Craig Bryan's house to her house," says Thomas Cashman. He gives directions to that address. We can't mention that address for legal reasons. Thomas Cashman then continues on to say, "It's full of cameras. That would pick me up coming into her house. They would have been caught on CCTV. Nobody does." Thomas Cashman also says many houses in that area have cameras in the front and in the back. He continues to say, "Whereabouts am I going to her house? I never went to her house. The person who has done it, if he went to her house as well, this person would be getting caught on CCTV there. You should be playing it to the jury. Can you explain to the jury why you haven't? It's proof that nobody went to her house. I certainly have not gone to her house." "Have you finished?" asked David. "I have finished, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. "You seem to know a lot about CCTV, says David. "I've been looking at CCTV. I'm in prison for something I've not done. I'm looking at my papers. I've noticed there's cameras. I'm at my mate Craig's. It's impossible for me to go to her house without getting caught on CCTV, says Thomas Cashman. David McLaughlin then refers to phone records. He says there was a call from the unnamed witness to her partner, Paul Russell. David says, "Were you aware of that call being made?" "No, I was not aware," says Thomas Cashman. "You're at Snowbury Road," says David. "I am at Snowbury Road, the home address of Craig Brine," says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman is then later seen in Paul Russell's car. They show this to the jury via CCTV. Thomas Cashman says to this, "I seen him on Snowbury Road. I got a lip of him to Asbest Road. On the way round, I raised the issue of the money he owed me." "You were just sitting off outside," says David. "I was sitting outside. As I was outside, I flagged him down and I've got to Asbest Road with him," says Thomas Cashman. "Did you get into it on the unnamed witnesses road?" says David. "No, I did not," says Thomas Cashman. "Would you regularly flag someone down and get a lift?" asked David. "That will happen on numerous occasions. I'm in the garden and someone comes down. I'd flag them, or they'd stop anyway. I'd go with them in the car," says Thomas Cashman. He then goes on to say he dropped money off for funeral flowers on Asbest Road. David McLaughlin then asks if Craig Brine could have given him a lift. Thomas Cashman says to this, "He could have done. Paul Russell did. If he hadn't come down Snowbury Road, I wouldn't have got a lift with him," says Thomas Cashman. "You've got in the car," says David. "No, I did not," says Thomas Cashman. "You've been taken back to your car," says David. "From Snowbury Road, I got in my road. I went to Scott Sweeney's and dropped off money for flowers," says Thomas Cashman. "In the car with Paul Russell, was it an okay chat?" says David. "He owes me a lot of money. I said, 'What's going on? You're taking the piss,' says Thomas Cashman. "Say it as it is. What did you say?" says David. "Where's my money?" "He said he's sorting it, trying to get it together," says Thomas Cashman. "Did you threaten him?" says David. "I said he needed to sort it out. He had £5 and some skunk. I said pass it round to our mate, me mate Craig," says Thomas Cashman. "Your name Craig, is he a drug dealer?" says David. "Craig's not a drug dealer, no. He's just a friend. He'll pick up money. It's drug money, yeah. He knows I sell cannabis, yeah," says Thomas Cashman. "Is this you fitting a story to the evidence you know is about to come?" says David. "No, I'm not," says Thomas Cashman. "You know what happens to Paul Russell. You know where he goes after this," says David. "He went to the shop. He's dropped me off and went to the shop. That was where he was going before he seen me," says Thomas Cashman. David then shows the CCTV footage of Paul Russell at Moira Wines at this time. "Do you recognise the top he's wearing?" says David. "Yeah, he's wearing a top. He's not wearing the pants because I had the pants for weeks in my sister's. Otherwise he would have been wearing the full suit," says Thomas Cashman. David then shows him the Under Armour tracksuit top. "When you were in the car, did you see this top?" says David. "I weren't paying attention to this top. If he had the full tracksuit at his house, he would have been wearing the tracksuit bottoms with the jacket. I had them in my sister's house. They had been there for many weeks," says Thomas Cashman. "You didn't get them on August the 22nd, says David. "No, and I proved it. The CCTV proves I didn't go to her house," says Thomas Cashman. David McLaughlin then says they will return to the clothing in a bit. He then shows Thomas Cashman on Snowbury Road shortly before 11 p.m. "I was speaking to Craig and I was speaking to Colin. I walked over to Nicky's," says Thomas Cashman. "Is that a house you own?" asked David. "I use it as a stash house. I went and grabbed some cannabis," says Thomas Cashman. When you went there, did anybody turn up? Asked David. No. I spoke to the lads. I told Craig. Paul's going to drop some cash round for you now and a little bit of weed, says Thomas Cashman. Paul Russell is then seen on CCTV walking a dog with a bag in his hand. David says he was away for 6 minutes and was in the area around Snowbury Road. You didn't see him there, did you? Says David. No, I didn't because I went to Nicky's. He went to Craig, says Thomas Cashman. Did Craig say to you, Paul Russell's here with some gear and money? Says David. I didn't see Craig after that. I got a lift off Paul McCarthy to my sister's, says Thomas Cashman. He wasn't bringing a bag of clothes round, was he? Says David. No, he wasn't. It was 9 ounces of skunk and money, says Thomas Cashman. Not clothes from the shooting, says David. No, it wasn't. 2 days later, I'm seen in Runcorn with the clothes and trainees on, says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman says he left with a bag of washing because the washer was broken at the flat. He says his trainers were left at the decks. Don't forget the decks are in Runcorn. The forensic DNA people have checked and everything on them trainees. They've checked for anything to do with Joseph Nee. They said someone kicked Joseph Nee and he was leaving a blood trail. They're my trainers what I had on and my tracky bottoms. They've checked the trainees. There's nothing on them. The pants are somewhere. I haven't got rid of them. 2 days later, I've got them on, says Thomas Cashman. David then asks him why he wasn't dropped at his own home by Paul McCarthy. Thomas Cashman says to this, I just never. I don't know who he is. I'm cautious. I just got him to drop me off at my sister's instead of my house. Why didn't you walk? It's literally round the corner, says David. Because I never. I got a lift with him, that's all I could say. I gave him directions. It would take a minute or two in a car, yeah, says Thomas Cashman. Was your head falling off? Asked David. No, it was not, says Thomas Cashman. Because of what happened earlier, says David. My head never fell off at all. I was in my mates. There was nothing for my head to fall off over. I've done nothing wrong, says Thomas Cashman. Could you hear sirens in the distance? Says David. There was police everywhere, yeah, says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman is then seen on a bike, travelling towards his niece Bobby Bailey's home. Thomas Cashman says, she was standing in the window. I went into the flat and got a lift home. She'd just come back from taking the dog for a walk. Later on, you say you stayed near her place, says David. In the same block. I'm not sure what number it is. It's my brother's mum. It's her boyfriend's flat, says Thomas Cashman. Do you have a name for him? Says David. Her name's Evie. The one who gave me the flat is Brian. Brian lives with Evie. I use the flat time to time. Sometimes putting things in there. Sometimes I'll go round there and get my head down. Brian's had the flat for years and years. I asked him, can I rent that flat off you? He was saying no at first. I said, I'm always arguing with my missus. I'm going to use it to get my head down there, says Thomas Cashman. You didn't have to pay him, says David. I didn't have to pay him, no, says Thomas Cashman. Did you discover in the morning a little girl had been shot, says David. When I woke up in the morning, yeah. I think in my area people would have been talking about it, says Thomas Cashman. Did you feel bad, says David. Of course I did, yeah. I've got children myself. The same week a lad got killed in Liverpool called Sam Rimmer. Then a couple of days after that, a girl got killed, Ashley Dale. A couple of days later, a little girl, Olivia Pratt-Korbel, got killed, says Thomas Cashman. Yes, it was a bad week for Liverpool, says David. Yes, says Thomas Cashman. David then plays some more CCTV footage showing a van outside the home of the unnamed witness. The van appears to pass and then reverse back towards that house. David says, "Why is it the day after the shooting you end up outside the unnamed witness's home?" Thomas Cashman said to this he was visiting a relative and saw Paul Russell. He says, "I seen him. I've seen Craig, and he said he passed around £2,500 and scraps. I spoke to another mate, Little Red, for a couple of minutes, then I went round. I saw Paul Russell in the garden. I said to my mate, 'Stop, reverse.' I said, 'What the fuck, you're taking the piss,'" says Thomas Cashman. "Did it get more serious?" asked David. "He was taking the piss. I told him if he doesn't pay the money, I'll take his graph phone and the car, I'll take it," says Thomas Cashman. "What if he didn't give it to you?" asked David. "If he didn't give it to me, well, he would have ended up getting a punch or something," says Thomas Cashman. "That's the world in which you live and work," says David. "If I let people do that all the time, I wouldn't be able to sell cannabis. I would have took the graft and I would have took the car. He's got a nice car to pay the bill off," says Thomas Cashman. "I'll use a term I'm sure you will understand. You can't let people rip you off," says David. "I can't let people take the piss," says Thomas Cashman. David then asks about the trip to Runcorn with his girlfriend. This is a trip to the decks. They made this trip on August the 24th, 2022. David says, "Did you need to get out of go-kart?" Thomas Cashman says, No whatsoever." "Was it getting heavy?" says David. No whatsoever," says Thomas Cashman. David then asks him if he owns that flat. "I rent it off my mate Kevin. I'm not going to say his second name," says Thomas Cashman. "Is he a criminal?" asked David. "He could be," says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman also says he paid Kevin £450 per month to rent that flat. David then asks if John Wynne lived there. "John Wynne got kicked out by his missus," says Thomas Cashman. "What happens on August 25th between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m, Mr. Cashman?" says David. "I'm not sure what you're getting at," says Thomas Cashman. David then shows Thomas Cashman footage of his girlfriend's Land Rover travelling between Merseyside and Cheshire on this date. David says, "Can you remember what happened in your house in Grenadier Drive?" "I got rid of my CCTV recorder, yeah. Nicky McHale's house on Snowy Road got raided for drugs. They went in there and took all my money, and me skunk and me cannabis. They arrested him for supplying. I found out and got a little worried, and I'd been in my stash house. I removed my recorder from my house. I don't know where it is. I took it out. I took it round to my mate's house. Now I don't know where it is," says Thomas Cashman. David asks Thomas Cashman who this mate was. Thomas Cashman says, "Just me mate," and Thomas Cashman refused to name that mate. David then says Thomas Cashman was arrested at the decks in Runcorn on September the 4th. He asked Cashman to look at his prepared statement, which he gave to police during his interview. David then reads through all the questions Thomas Cashman said no to or no comment to. These questions included his whereabouts on August 22nd and also his relationship with Joseph Nee. Joseph Nee was also known as Joey. David says, "The officers ask if you can give us an alibi. We can check it out. You say," says David. "No comment, because I got advised by my legal team. I listened to my solicitor and went no comment," says Thomas Cashman. "Were you wanting to speak?" says David. "I wanted to, but I listened to my solicitor," says Thomas Cashman. After being arrested on September the 4th, Thomas Cashman was released. He was also arrested a second time at a flat in Liverpool city centre. Thomas Cashman says to this, "I got arrested because she told a load of blatant lies. I got arrested and charged for this. David says in the next police interview, the detectives put part of the witness's statement to him, including telling Cashman she had reported waking up to find Tommy in my room, with his hands in his hair. Cashman did not respond. Cashman says to this, I didn't say nothing to them. I didn't want to speak to them. I just sat there and listened to the questions and gave them no answers. I got advised by my solicitor to go no comment. I just didn't say nothing, no, says Thomas Cashman. That was your right, says David. That was my right, yeah. My solicitor advised me not to, says Thomas Cashman. David then shows Thomas Cashman a picture of an Under Armour t-shirt recovered from his sister's address. His sister's name is Colleen Cashman. When did you take possession of that top? Asked David. Weeks and weeks before this, says Thomas Cashman. It seized on September the 5th. 9 weeks and 1 day later. You didn't pick it up on August 22nd, did you? Asked David. No, I did not, says Thomas Cashman. I just took them off at my sister's and went home, says Thomas Cashman. Would your sister store clothes in the prom box for you? Asked David. I'm not sure. I can't recall the prom box. I'd left them there, says Thomas Cashman. With a blood stain on, says David. The forensics said they found a bit of blood on the inside, yeah. I never said they're not Paul's. I get them off her after I'd slept with her, says Thomas Cashman. David says, do you accept you've worn them? Yeah, I have worn them, yeah, says Thomas Cashman. You know what they've got on them, says David. Like my DNA, says Thomas Cashman. Something else as well, says David. GSR as well, says Thomas Cashman. Gunshot residue, 2 particles. Any idea how 2 particles of GSR, type 1, got onto these bottoms you were wearing? Says David. No, I don't. I can't say how they got on there, says Thomas Cashman. It's not because you shot someone on Kingsheath Avenue, says David. No, the forensic woman said if somebody went to her house and they had just let off a firearm and they took the clothes off and flung them in the kitchen, she'd expect a very high level of GSR to be around that area. There was nothing whatsoever in that area. There would be a high level of GSR. They took swabs everywhere and there was nothing, says Thomas Cashman. There would be high levels of GSR. They took swabs everywhere and there was nothing, says Thomas Cashman. Why did you leave those tracksuit bottoms? Says David. Because I just slept with her. We had sex in the kitchen. I had all white stuff over my tracksuit bottoms and my t-shirt, says Thomas Cashman. What was the white? Says David. The white what's come off her. You call it semen, says Thomas Cashman. Has it come from you? Asked David. No, from her, says Thomas Cashman. I was doing myself a spliff. I looked down and I had all white, all over the top of my pants and the bottom of my t-shirt. Were you not upstairs with your boxers on? Says David. No, I was in the kitchen having sex. They were the clothes she gave me, says Thomas Cashman. Were they clothes she gave you after the shooting went wrong? Asked David. No, not whatsoever. I didn't go to her house that night. The CCTV proves nobody went to her house that night, says Thomas Cashman. He then says he cannot recall seeing the witness wearing the tracksuit bottoms. Did you ever ask for them back? Says David. No, says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman is then shown a series of CCTV stills of the gunman wearing all black clothing. Thomas Cashman says to this, "That's not me." David asks, "Are you the sort of person who uses people?" "No, I don't use people. I help people as much as I can. I'm not a bad person. I'd give someone my last £1,000, says Thomas Cashman. Did you use your sister? Asked David. I used the house. I always looked after my sisters, says Thomas Cashman. Do you use your brother? Says David. No, my mate uses his house to sell cannabis. He's not stupid. He's told me to stop it, because he was never there. I always did it. It is disrespectful, says Thomas Cashman. Did you use the unnamed witness? Asked David. No, I did not use the unnamed witness, says Thomas Cashman. Did you ever deal drugs from your own home? Asked David. No, I would never, says Thomas Cashman. You wouldn't do it on your own doorstep, where your kids live, says David. No, says Thomas Cashman. You've waited and waited, haven't you, and tried your best to fit the prosecution evidence to your story, says David. No, I have not. That's what you've done. You haven't shown no proof. You've given theories to the jury. That's not true. That's just what you think. I understand that's your job. I respect it, but it's just not true, says Thomas Cashman. David then asks, now you tell the court that you were dealing drugs. Thomas Cashman says to this, yeah, I was dealing drugs. I'll hold my hands up. I'm a drug dealer. I'm not a bad drug dealer who sells Class A drugs. I don't do anything bad. I always grew up smoking cannabis. Some people may look at that as a bad thing, but I don't think I'm a bad person for doing that, says Thomas Cashman. Did you ever drive that Citroen Berlingo van again? Asked David. I left the van on the corner of Snowbury Road. There's police everywhere. I'm disqualified from driving. I don't have insurance. With police being everywhere, I didn't want to drive. The van did get drove again. It was getting used every day, just not by me, says Thomas Cashman. David then plays the CCTV footage of the moment Joseph Nee was shot on Kingsheath Avenue. As Thomas Cashman is being shown the CCTV footage, he looks down at the screen in front of him. David says to him, that's you, isn't it? No, it's not me. Joseph Nee even put it in his statement, says Thomas Cashman. Thomas Cashman is then stopped by the judge. The judge says, he didn't ask a question about what somebody else said. David continues, you're not prepared to own this because you killed a little girl. I did not kill a little girl. Is my DNA anywhere on the house on Kingsheath Avenue? Could you tell the jury that, please? If my DNA was there, you'd tell the jury. Joseph Nee's give a naming of the suspect who did it. Is this person's DNA on the door of that house? You can't answer that, says Thomas Cashman. You're not prepared to own this, says David. At this point, it becomes a bit much, and Cheryl Corbell walks out of the courtroom. Obviously the judge notices this, and rightly so calls a short break. So this will be the end of part 2.